Hi and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you 10 things I wish someone had told me when I first started homeschooling. So if you enjoy this type of content and other homeschool and lifestyle content, please remember to subscribe and let's get into it. All right, I'm almost over my cold, so hopefully my throat is being okay. I'm in this room and it's sort of put back together. The whiteboard is in a new spot, so this is kind of weird because it shows my reflection back there. But with our built-ins coming, if you missed me talking about that, we're gonna have built-ins on all these other walls. This is where the whiteboard has to go. So it's a little bit different and weird, and maybe once everything else is in here, I'll film in different ways. I have no idea. We'll see, but for right now, this is just what it is. So everything else is kind of a mess this way from me. Behind me is sort of put together. If you can see the ground, there's no baseboards over here. There's no baseboards right here because we were just waiting for the built-ins, but it's still gonna be like probably 6 weeks. So it'll be like right before we leave for Africa. So I put out a video, it's probably been a couple weeks. It's maybe even been longer because we were doing floors. So everything is kind of a mess in my head, about 5 things I wish I had when we first started homeschooling. And so I'll link that down in the description box. And as I made that one, I also was thinking about this one, 10 things I wish I knew or someone had told me when we first started homeschooling. Some of these are like personal things from me. Some are from observation. I asked one of my friends and so she gave me some different ideas for them personally. So it's kind of a mixture of them, and some of them are really short and we'll go through them quickly. Some of them have a few more parts to them than just one. And then I also have a bonus tip at the end. The first thing I wish someone had told me when I started homeschooling was that it is going to be hard and you're going to want to quit. And I know you're like, well, that's reassuring, but it's true. I think going into it, knowing that, and I think when I first started homeschooling, I knew it was going to be hard. Like just adjusting all the things. I didn't know all the parts that would be hard. You know, that was something that kind of came with time as we went through things, and it continues to be hard in different ways in different stages of life. So it never stops being hard to homeschool. It just kind of changes. The hardness changes. But there have been many of times, especially in those first 2 years. We've been homeschooling, this will be our 9th year going into this fall. And so when my oldest was in kindergarten, he only went for a month. We pulled him out, started homeschooling. And when I first started homeschooling those first 2 years, there was many times where I wanted to send them back to school. Mostly, you know, my oldest was really the only one old enough to be in school, but I was like, man, is this what I'm gonna end up doing for my life? It was not something, I'm not a mom that loves having my kids around all the time, which probably makes me sound like a horrible person, but I'm one of those like, when they went to school, I was happy about it, you know, and I still send my kids when they're young to preschool for 1 or 2 years because it's helpful for me. It helps us in homeschool because they're kind of crazy at that age and a distraction when we're trying to do other things. But those, I got through those first 2 years and I call that a win because there was multiple times where I was like, you can just let them go back to school. It'll be fine. It's not a big deal. And I was like, no, we're gonna keep going. And then I think once we got past that point, we still have moments where it's hard. And when kids go back to school right now is when kids are going back to public school. I'm like, oh, it'd be nice to send them back to just have the whole day to myself. That would be really nice. But I'm past the point where I want to quit. You know, I'm to the point where I'm like, I see the value. This is our lifestyle now. It's not just something I was trying to get through. So I think that's important to know from the beginning, whether you're starting homeschooling when your kids are small or when they're older, it's going to be hard. And there are going to be times when you want to quit, which is why it's important to know why you are homeschooling in the first place. The second thing is simple is usually better. And this applies in so many ways, but I think in homeschool curriculum, simple is better, especially when you're just starting. Even if you have older kids that you're starting with, trying to just keep things very basic, simple. It's at least my tendency to go out and be like, oh, we should try this and we should try this. Like I like to be minimal in a lot of ways, but you see different things and they all look intriguing and maybe they'll all work. But then it's just a whole lot and you're overwhelmed and you've spent a lot of money or different things like that. So usually keeping it simple is better. Even with young kids, if you just have a few things they can play with or count or color, like things that have different colors that they can sort, right? You can keep it very, very simple and still have a very good homeschool experience. You don't have to overcomplicate it. You don't have to have tons of co-op groups or all these things you're doing 100 miles an hour all day, every day. I think simple and calm is much better than having it complicated and busy. The third thing is to remember that they're just kids and don't push them too hard. You know, if you're struggling, if you're all just having a hard day, maybe you should just stop that day with homeschool and take a break and work on the relationship with your kids. And I think this is hard for me even now to remember, okay, that they are just kids. It's very, very hard for me. I really struggle. I've struggled my whole life with like this perfectionism personality attitude, and I have gotten so much better than I was when I was younger, but it's still really, really hard for me in so many ways and probably will never go away. It'll be always something that I struggle with. But I have high expectations, but I need to remember that they're kids. Having high expectations isn't bad, but knowing that they're kids and they might need a break. Maybe they really are just having a hard time. Maybe they didn't sleep well the night before and it's just a struggle. Emotionally, they're struggling. You know, they start going through puberty. That provides a whole nother kinds of stuff going on. And so just remember that they are kids and we're all just human, and go with that, okay? Remember to give everybody a little bit of grace. The fourth thing to remember is that just because you have a struggling child doesn't mean you are a bad parent or a bad teacher. This is really hard because when you are responsible for your kids' education completely, it's very easy to not give yourself any grace. Okay, you might be better at providing grace for your children, but for yourself, you provide none. And you look at everything that, oh, my child can't read now. They're not doing good with math. They're really struggling with this, all those things, and you just take them on like, this is my fault. I'm a horrible teacher. I didn't teach them the way I should have. Maybe we should have used a different curriculum, right? 100 miles an hour is where we go. And so to make sure we give ourselves that grace as well, because a struggling child it's probably just a struggling child. And not in a way that they're bad or anything like that, but we all struggle with different things at different times. And a lot of times kids will start to get there if you just give them enough time to do that. And so don't internalize everything, because you will be beating yourself up constantly because you are the one that is in charge of your kids' education. And it's just really hard sometimes not to internalize all of that and say, this is all my fault. The fifth thing is homeschool funding, like knowing someone telling me what's available, which I talked about this in the what I wish I had when we started homeschooling. You know, I wish I had homeschool funding, but I also wish I knew about it. And not all states provide funding and not all provide the same amounts of funding. Everything is just different. And so make sure you check out what you have in your state. Maybe ask someone that's more experienced, but that's something I wish I knew about. I don't even think I really thought about it. When we first started homeschooling, I heard people mention funding, but I was like, I don't even know what that means. Not realizing like some places you can get a good amount of money to spend on your child's education when you homeschool. So make sure you understand that that is a possibility depending where you live. The sixth thing is there are a lot of co-op options. I know I mentioned to keep it simple, which I still think is true, but that doesn't mean you can't belong to a co-op. I just personally don't like to have my schedule just like every single day, all week long. I like to have breathing room and time where we can just enjoy being here doing school together and not feel rushed all the time. But there are a lot of groups, and I'm not a social butterfly, not even a little bit. I really struggle with that. And so we have only been involved a little bit off and on with groups throughout the years. Most of them haven't lasted super long for us just because of either the timing of it or maybe the fit. I think that's something that's really difficult, is trying to find groups that fit well with you and your interests. That can be really hard. But like looking at Facebook groups and seeing what's available in your city, in your county. Ours is like a county Facebook page. And so they might have different things that people are doing, or you can start a group as well. That might be a little bit ambitious if you're just starting homeschool, but just know that there are lots of groups out there that homeschool, and you're not doing it alone. So if you want a big group of people to do stuff, or, you know, smaller groups here and there to do stuff with, or that have similar interests as you, there are lots of options for that. You just need to look for them. All right, the seventh thing, I've stopped doing them with my fingers. It gets tricky after like 6, but is to know that there is a lot of used curriculum options. There's a lot of people on Facebook within these same types of groups with your county or your city that will sell stuff back. And so you can look for those types of things. There's several things on like eBay. Is eBay even popular? It's been a few years since I've even been on eBay. But I bought a lot of used books on eBay when we first started for different types of curriculum that I didn't know if we wanted to actually use the curriculum, or we didn't want the whole curriculum. I just wanted specific things. And so I looked for them used. There's a lot of people that do different sells. There's even some here on YouTube. I know Ashley from Grace and Grit, maybe every year, does some sort of sell and gets rid of a lot of her old curriculum or books. Sorry, my throat is still kind of raspy, and this is a lot of talking for me. And so I'm trying not to like cough. But, and so there's a lot of options for used types of curriculum that you can find, so that you're not always buying brand new things, especially if that is too costly for you to do. And, you know, or you don't want to spend money in that way, which is totally cool as well. I love buying curriculum, but not everybody wants to spend their money that way. So you can go and find used options and then spend your money in other ways. Okay, the 8th thing is socialization. And this is a pretty hot topic when it comes to homeschooling. I don't feel like this is something I necessarily really questioned when we started homeschooling or was worried about, but I know a lot of people do. But I have my bachelor's degree is in human development. And so I learned a lot about socialization. One of my classes was socialization across childhood or something like that. And so I learned a lot about it in school. And socialization isn't necessarily what most people think it is. I did look up a definition just because sometimes that's helpful, and then just listening to me, but it says developing identity and respect for social structure. You know, they understand customs, ideas, norms, values. And that's what socialization is, okay? And some of that happens, yes, by interacting with other children, but sometimes those interactions aren't always great. And we don't always want our kids to learn how to like interact with the community from their peers, because their peers also don't know how to interact with the community. And so when we think of socialization, you always hear, my kids need to be able to play. That's not really it. Okay, socialization isn't really that. And it's also not putting them in tons of activities. Okay, oh, see, my kids are socialized. They're in all these activities. It's also not really that either. It's learning for the, like, basically, it's having them being able to function as human beings as they grow up in a community, and being able to talk to people, being able to interact with them, to ask good questions, to be respectful, and to, you know, say nice things and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's what it involves. And sometimes kids do not learn nice things from their peers. Okay, sometimes it's the opposite. And so this is something that can be taught through activities for sure, like through them interacting with other people, through playing sports, through being involved in arts or dance or whatever it is they like to do. Those can definitely help and contribute to that. But a big part of it is actually taught by their parents, by who they interact with at home. And when you go out and talk to other people, they observe those interactions. Or even, you know, if you go to church, how you interact at church. Do you talk to people? Do you ask them how their week was? Those types of things, you being respectful to your community, to people around you, is the biggest way your kids are going to learn to be socialized. Okay, and how they're going to learn to interact appropriately with the world around them. And that's important for us to remember. So don't be so concerned about that. I know it's always a huge concern, like my kids need friends. How are they gonna be socialized? It's not that, like they can still play. I have some kids that love to play and some that don't. You know, some that just are more like me and they're more introverted, and some that they live and die by having friends to play with. Maybe live and breathe is better than live and die. That kind of was morbid, but anyway. And so it's just something important to remember, that socialization isn't generally what people think it is, and that your kids interacting with you and you teaching them how to interact appropriately with other people, even just knocking on doors and asking for a frisbee that flew in someone's backyard, that's really important. Have them do it. You don't need to do it for them. And they can learn to interact appropriately with the world around them and say nice things and be respectful. That's really the key. The ninth thing is it's okay to not fit into a specific method of homeschool. To be honest, I do not even know all the methods of homeschool. This is something that I am just not good at. You know, I know people talk about Charlotte Mason. If you asked me what these things meant, I wouldn't be able to exactly tell you either. You know, there's like classical, there's like traditional type stuff where you're teaching mostly public school type, but at home. You know, there's eclectic, which I feel like a good amount of people could fall into eclectic, just because we pick and choose what we like. I would consider us more eclectic, just like, well, I like to do this, but I don't like that from this particular method. But some people are very like, this is the method we use. But it's okay not to fit into anything specific and to kind of just have the pick and choose, the eclectic idea of just, this is what works best for us, or this is what works best for us right now with this stage of life we're in. So if you see other people teaching a different way, it's not because they're right and you're wrong, or you're right and they're wrong. Did I say the same thing twice? I don't know. You get what I mean though. Nobody's right and wrong there. It's just a different way of teaching, and you're just catering to maybe your interests, what your kids like, the stages of life they're in, and it's totally fine. And the 10th thing is it's okay if you don't know something well enough to teach it. Learn with your kids, okay? That's great. You can even tell them like, I really don't know that much about this. We're gonna learn about it together. But I think it can be overwhelming to come in and try to teach something that you just aren't comfortable teaching. And the lucky part is there's a lot of really good homeschool curriculum where you do not have to teach it that much, right? Somebody else does it for you, or it's all written out. So you don't even have to do that much. You just read it and they figure it out. And it's really easy. And like the Good and the Beautiful for their older math grades have some really good solutions manuals. There's a lot of good options. But for a lot of things like sciences or history, if you don't know about it, that's fine. Just read it and you all learn together. That's the joy of homeschooling. It kind of reignites that excitement for learning that maybe, hopefully, you had when you were younger. And then the bonus tip, I put it here as a bonus tip because I feel like it encompasses all of these tips that I'm giving, or all these things that I wish someone had told me when we first started homeschooling, is that confidence in homeschooling comes with time. It's okay right now to not know everything and to not feel comfortable in everything you're doing. Okay, there's always gonna be new things to learn anyways, and moments that like kind of test that confidence that you've had. But it comes over time as you see what you like, as you gain more strength in what you're doing, and as you help your kids, as you see them develop over time, then you'll start to gain that confidence. And it doesn't mean you'll know everything or everything will be perfect, but you can feel confident in what you're doing as a homeschool mom and as a parent. And so I just love that idea with all these tips. Just remember that it takes time to really feel comfortable and confident in homeschooling. All right, so those are 10 things plus a bonus tip that I wish someone had told me when I first started homeschooling. Comment down below other things that you wish you had known. If you are more veteran homeschoolers, or even if you are just starting homeschooling, maybe you already have thoughts about this. Comment what you wish someone had told you, or what you wish you could know now. Maybe you're still like, I'm still missing some things, please help me out. And then hopefully everyone in the comments can help each other out. And remember to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you next time.